Station. We have been working in the field of safety since 2017. We have spread awareness amongst the masses regarding the safety in various spheres of life. We promote it by organizing productive trainings and educational seminars. Till now, we have conducted more than 40 trainings covering 1800 plus participants. And today, we will talk on IMS, the Integrated Management System. It integrates all of an organization's systems and processes into one complete framework, enabling an organization to work as a single unit with unified objectives. Today, we have Mr. Mangesh Brahme as our instructor, as a speaker, who will shed light on this topic. He is a safety professional since last 3 decades. He is representing many forums like Bombay Chamber of Commerce, FICCI, NSC, Maharashtra, etc. He is a government approved statutory safety auditor and in panels of TUV, SDS, etc. He is a certified radiologist safety officer. He has many expertise like Six Sigma, Poka Yoga, DMAIC methodology, etc. He has also been awarded by Green Belt certificate. I would like, before that, I would clear the agenda of our session. Quote, we will take 5 minutes for introduction, which we have already taken. Now we till 5 o'clock, we'll take a small session of training in which sir will give you a small, introduction of IMS. Then after that, we'll take a 10 minutes break at 5 o'clock and a small quiz, a fun quiz would be there, which we all will enjoy. I hope we all will enjoy. After 5:10 to 6:10, the complete session, we will continue with the session, and around 5:10, we will keep an open discussion with the speaker on this topic, and we'll take 5 to 10 minutes for a feedback session. This is how we will keep our session. Now I would request Sir, Mr. Mangesh Brahme, to please shed on our light. Sir, please shed the light on the topic and take over the charge. Sir, could you please, sir, are you able to hear me?
Thank you, Suruchi.
Thank you, sir.
I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, we are here to discuss on integrated management systems. First and foremost thing, the management systems, what we are referring to is the International Organization for Standardization, which came actively in India in the year 1993 after globalization and liberalization. To start with, in the year 1994, to be very precise, the system of quality management system was adopted by India. Most of the companies started going in for certification for quality systems, that is ISO 9000. During that time, it was ISO 9001 1994. After, say, a few years, the environment management systems was introduced. And few years back, it was OSHA's 18001, followed by ISO 45001, that is the safety, occupational health and safety management system. All the industries started going in for certification of the quality management system. Few companies went for environment management systems and few companies went for safety management systems. Most of the companies after implementation of quality, they went for the environment management system, followed by OSHA, and now ISO 45000. So it becomes very tedious for the organization, and basically it's time-consuming thing for maintaining the systems. When we talk of management system, it's involvement of each and every function in that particular system. So be it quality management system, environment management system, or occupational health safety management system, all the functions are to contribute in the system. They have a role to play. Few functions have little role, other functions have major roles depending on the system what they are in. But each and every function has to have a role, responsibilities in that particular system. So many a times it used to happen that you need to maintain a document. That's the prime responsibility of prime thing for implementation of the system. So there is to be a multiple documents. It's like quality management system, separate document, environment management system, and then followed by the occupational health and safety management system. However, and all these three systems has to be an organogram wherein we are talking about the review of this particular system on a periodic basis. Again, there is to be a multiple reviews of various systems put together. The audit part is to consume a lot of time. So it was felt necessary. Why not we integrate a system? So this system got integrated once the high level system came into existence. That is basically after 2015, high level structure, what we talk about, wherein all the clauses from 1 to 10 are similar clauses pertaining to all the systems, that is quality, safety, and environment management system. So it becomes easier for the industries to amalgamate all the system put together into one document. It again became easy for the industries like to save on the time factor by conducting a common audit. But again, for any system or any improvement, what we are talking about, because this again is a continual improvement when we talk of IMS. So it has got its own pros and cons. The pros are basically you can save on time, the documentation can be amalgamated, the roles and responsibilities can be specified in a better way and better understanding of the system, the training part, the audit, internal audit as well as the external audit, and the meetings, which we could save on those aspects. However, many a time, some systems got the stepmotherly treatment, some got more preference during the audit. So many a time the focus was on the person. The person conducting the audit is from which function, so his focus was more on that particular part of the system rather than the other system. So there is pros and cons for each and every. Hence, when we talk of integrated management system, a justice has to be given to all the management systems, and the focus should be on all the management systems put together. So it's not that it has to be having an equal weightage as far as the integrated management system is concerned. Let's understand what is this integrated management system and how we can simplify the system put together so that we can understand each and every system put together, and the weightage can be given to, or equal weightage can be given to all the systems. Next slide, please. We'll see all the systems. Basically, we are talking about 9001, 14001, and we are not talking about OSHA. It's ISO 45001 2018. The OSHA was the previous standard. It provides a framework for implementation and IMS, which meets an organization stakeholders' interest and can help to reduce liability and risk. Why do you talk about liability and risk? More focus on liability and risk is towards the environment management systems and the safety management. When we talk of environment management system, it is the public at large who are put to risk. When we talk of OSHAs or ISO 45000, we are talking about the occupational health and safety. The second aspect is facilitate better business processes. Here, more focus. The emphasis is on the customer, the quality part of it. But we should not forget the environment also, because environment plays a very important role. Suppose due to your business or due to your activities, anything goes wrong anything goes wrong out of your processes, and if there is a major catastrophe, then you lose the business. At times you have to shut down your plant also. So the better business processes is also equally important as far as safety and environment is concerned. Minimize waste and energy bills. What we are referring to is here the energy part of it, which is a part of environmental management system. Minimize waste. Again, when we talk of waste, it is again a part of environment management system as well as ISO 9000, which we are talking about the quality management system. If you go for a better efficiency, better effectiveness, definitely the waste will be minimized. In turn, it will help the environment to a larger extent. Enhance company's reputation. Again, when we talk of this enhance company's reputation, all the three system count put together helps you to enhance the reputation of your organization. Improve compliance. Each and every aspect has got some or the other compliances to be done under various heads. Like when we talk about quality management system, the customer is your boss. So you have to comply to the customer's requirement. That is what we are talking about, the compliance as far as quality management system is concerned. As far as environment system is concerned, there are various environment laws which you have to comply with. And as far as safety is concerned, the prime legislation is your Factories Act. So the compliance is the bare minimum requirement which you have to adhere to, meet concerns of interested parties. Now, in the previous standards, the quality was referring to the customer, and the environment and safety was referring to the interested parties. But put together, as far as the high structure level is concerned, they have now have a common definition which is talking about the interested parties. So here, when we talk of interested parties, the customer under the quality management system becomes your interested party. Again, the rules and regulations also, there are a lot of regulations as far as quality is concerned. So in that quality management systems, those interested parties is the statutory requirement, the obligations, the principles of your organization, basically all those becomes a part and parcel of your interested parties under ISO 9000. As far as 14,000 is concerned, your employees is the interested parties, the neighbors are interested parties, the stakeholders are interested parties, the various government regulations, agencies, regulators are your interested parties. Gain international recognition. When we talk of, these are the international standards. So basically, after your certification, definitely you are at a par with any other organization which has got a international standards. So you are recognized as a benchmark. Improve marketing potential. Again, it's a selling point as far as implementation of the system is concerned. So it's a selling marketing point for you for getting business. Next slide. Let's look at all the three. When we talk of this is a high level structure, as I told you, wherein all the clauses are identical clauses, but it refers to various facets. Like ISO 9001, we talk about the quality, ISO 14,000, we talk about the environment management system, and ISO 45,000, we talk about occupational health and safety management. Let's look at each clause one by one. Understanding the organization. When we talk of understanding the organization and its context, basically, so we are talking about what is that pain areas of yours under all the three heads. The pain areas related to the quality, the pain areas related to the environment, and the pain areas related to the occupational health and safety. So you have to understand that. What do you mean by understanding the organizations? pain area. So basically you have to list down, you have to make a laundry list of various issues what you are facing as far as all the three systems are concerned separately. So those areas are the pain areas for you. So you have to have a laundry list for all those pain areas. Second, we are talking about the interested parties. So the interested parties previously we were talking about is the interested parties has to give you, you have to go to the interested parties, seek their feedback. When we talk of seeking their feedback, what is that they are interested in from you? What is their expectations and needs? That has to be properly logged. When we talk of this, again, the complaints or the grievances raised by the interested parties also becomes a part and parcel of 4.2. So the interested parties, we can't avoid or we can't neglect the interested parties. You have to approach the interested parties and take their opinions and views on your management system. The scope, what is the scope is basically we are talking about the black box. Scope is a black box wherein when we talk of your organization, you have a factory. So factory becomes your scope, not the whole of an organization. When we talk of organization, it's an industry. I am talking a larger picture. So our focus will be on a particular single unit. Then we are talking about the process. We'll go into the deeper part of it later on. Here we are looking at understanding the need and expectation of interested parties under ISO 14000. So when we talk of environment management system, what is that your neighbor is interested in from your processes? What is their issues related from your processes? Again, when we talk of interested parties here, the regulatory bodies, what is the statutory requirement which is pertaining to your organization? You have to look at those things and the obligations. Here we are talking about interested parties. We are talking about the principles also becomes a part and parcel of your interested parties. Your sister concern also becomes a part and parcel of your interested parties. Then we are talking about in all the things we have to basically properly identify what's the scope, what is the black box, what is the start of the process, what is that activities, and what is the output from the process. So we are looking at the scope, which is of the plant, basically where you are operating. And when we talk of ISO 9001, ISO 45000 and ISO 45000 and ISO 14000, under ISO 9001, your operation becomes a scope. But in case of ISO 14000 as well as ISO 45000, the whole of the plant, wherein even if there is a different activity altogether going on in the plant, that again becomes a part and parcel of your scope under ISO 9000, ISO 14000 as well as ISO 45000. Because anything goes wrong out of their operation can have an adverse effect on the atmosphere, or when we talk of that, for that matter, it can be a risk. So when we talk of ISO 14000 and as well as ISO 45000, if there is some different operation in your plant, that also becomes a part and parcel of the scope under EMS as well as OSHAs, or occupational safety health and occupational health safety management systems. Now we move on to the leadership. Look at the leadership part and commitment. Previously, when we were talking about, there was no clause as such called leadership prior to 2015 standards. Now the whole focus lies on the leadership. Leadership is the top management we are talking about in that particular plant. So that leader has to be committed. And again, when we talk of leadership, we are talking about the top management of the organization, wherein we are talking about the strategies which are being set. The strategies has to be downtailed down. The organization strategies has to be downtailed down to the plant. So that's also equally important. So leadership plays a very important role as far as the system is concerned. Again, that is the audit. When we talk of audit, during the audit, third-party audit, the auditor interviews the top management and gets the feel as to how the system is basically working and what is the commitment from the top management as far as, and whether as far as the system functioning and whether the strategies, the activities are in line with the strategies laid down by the organization. Let's move on to third thing is the policy. You can definitely amalgamate all the three policies put together. When we talk of IMS, you can have a common policy. QMS, quality, environment, and occupational health and safety can be amalgamated into one policy. It, again, when it's the voluntary standard, so it's left to you. It's not mandatory that you need to amalgamate or you need to keep separate, but it's left to you. For the ease of the organization, you can amalgamate or you can keep it separately. Customer focus is the main area as far as ISO 9001:2015 is concerned. The communication part, again, when we talk of communication, we are talking about communication as an internal communication and external communication. The additional part, as far as 45,000 is concerned, is the consultation and participation of workers. Because workers plays a very important role as far as safety is concerned. We are talking about involvement of the workers in safety activities, in the meetings, various meetings, their suggestions, their opinions are most important, and that is a part and parcel of the ISO 45001:2018. Next slide, please. Risk and opportunities. We are talking about risk and opportunities. So what are the risks under the planning stage? What are the risks basically you are facing? Again, when we talk of risk, it's risk we are talking about from ISO 9000 point of view. What is the risk what we are envisaging, and what are the opportunities? So all those things you have to list it down. So when we talk of risk and opportunities, we are talking about the national and international levels also. We have to consider those economics part, the societal part. That also will be a part and parcel of the risk and opportunities which we are referring to over here. The objectives are basically, we are talking about the improvement objectives. Under the quality objectives, then we can have objectives pertaining to environment as well as safety management system. So those things are alike, but it depends, it is pertaining to that particular work area. The supports, the resource again are the common part of it. The competence, when what we are talking about, is very much critical as far as the environment and safety is concerned, because we can I can give you examples, two examples. Major examples is basically, as far as safety is concerned, the boilers. The boiler attendant, he has to be a first class boiler attendant who should undergo a training part. When we talk of operation of ETP and effluent treatment plant, so that operator should be trained operator. So the competency is very important as far as environment and safety is concerned, because any activities, any small basically issues or troubleshooting can lead to a major disaster. So competency plays a very important role as far as environment and occupational health is concerned. Awareness as such has to be given to all the employees and the contract workers, which is common as far as the system is concerned. Here we are talking about the infrastructure, because infrastructure is very critical as far as ISO 9000 is concerned, because you have to get efficiency, it has to be effective, the quality requirement of the customer, what is that is required based on the infrastructure, which is very critical. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here we are looking at the communication, which I already told you. The internal communications we are talking about is by various means, which is through meetings, through displays, through trainings. And the external communication we are talking about is dealing with the external interested parties, wherein the internal parties can have issues. If they have some opinions to be raised, or if they have some grievances, all those things becomes a part and parcel of the external communication. in the previous standards prior to 2015, we were talking about the documented system, the documentation and records. Here we are talking about documented information. What do you mean by documented information? Documented information can be in any form. It can be in soft media, it can be in hard media, or it can be in any other form. So when we talk of it, it's the information which has to be documented. Not specifically, we are talking about a hard copy, or we are talking about it in any particular form. Rest all are common things. Basically, we are talking about the control of document. Those are common for all the standards. So it becomes very easy to have a concise, integrated documentation. Wherein basically we need to be very specific, and the inputs of each function has to be taken for that particular area. So when we talk of compiling the document, it doesn't mean a lot of references has to be given, so that because all the SOPs can be a part and parcel of the reference document. When it comes to the operation, we are talking about the SOPs, that is the standard operating procedures, can be the reference. So in your main manual, you can just give the reference of those SOPs in that particular location or in that particular department or the functions. Those references can be given pertaining to that standards. Emergency preparedness and response, what we look at the clause 8.2. This, as far as 14,000 and 45,000 is concerned, lot many things are common, wherein you can have a common emergency preparedness and response procedures for both the standard put together. So there can be more of the focus will be on the environment part, because when we talk of emergency preparedness, most of the things is the public at large which gets affected, that we talk about is an emergency situation. So here we refer to the emergencies. Here we refer to is on-site and off-site plans, what you have to have, and then you need to test your procedures at a periodic interval. So the document can be a common document as far as emergency preparedness and response is concerned. There need not be different for environment and different for safety. It can be clubbed together. Next slide, please. Performance evaluation, we are talking about monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. Here again, as far as document is concerned, the references is concerned, you have to give the references of those things. The procedures you have to just write down separately for separate standards. When we talk of monitoring and measurement, as far as environment is concerned, we know that when we talk of environment, we are talking about air, water, solid waste, biomedical waste. All those things are a part and parcel of environment, wherein you need to have what are the standard requirements as far as your consent conditions. You have to monitor it on a periodic basis and then maintain those records. The analysis has to be done on a regular basis from your end, or you have to get it done from the third party approved by the MOEF. As far as 45,000 is concerned, we are talking about the work environment. The work environment monitoring and measurement we are talking about is the air, the air, basically work environment, the ventilation survey, we are talking about the noise monitoring, we are talking about the vibration. All those things becomes a part and parcel of the ISO 45001/2008 monitoring and measurement work environment. Evaluation of compliance. When we talk of evaluation of compliance, basically, for environment is concerned, whatever consent conditions are there, what are the requirement of the statutory requirement, whether you and then what is the periodicity of that. That has to be those compliance has to be evaluated. You need to have a legal register, and you have to have the compliance sheet wherein you look at those things and then see whether all those compliance which has to be done at a regular periodicity, the returns which has to be filed is being done or not. Again, when we talk of 45,000, there are various standards. Under 45,000, we are talking about the Factories Act, the Maharashtra Factory Rule, then we are talking about static and mobile pressure vessels, various compliances, the gas cylinder rule, all those things becomes a part and parcel of evaluation of compliance under ISO 45000. The internal audit basically you can do together, but you have to do justice by giving time allocation to each standard separately. It can't happen that an auditor goes for auditing and then, as I told you, like suppose if an auditor is from a particular function, he will be more keen, like the quality assurance person going as an auditor, internal auditor to a particular department. His focus will be on the quality part of it. So he should not miss on the other two aspects of environment as well as the safety standard. So justice has to be given to all the three standards when you do an internal audit. The reviews can be conducted commonly and basically, and each in the reviews you have to address all the three standards, but the meeting can be one wherein all the three standards are basically dealt with and discussed upon. The rest part is improvement, wherein we are talking about non-conformities, corrective actions. So pertaining to that particular standards, we can have a focus on and then have a corrective action. So this becomes a part and parcel of your non-conformity report. This comes out of your non-conformity report, or the continual improvement can be a part of your management review meeting where it is discussed for the improvement. And the clause 4.1, when we talk of risk and opportunities, that there is always a scope for improvement in your system, which calls for a continuous improvement. Plus, when we talk of the interested parties giving you inputs for improvement, so that also becomes a part and parcel of your continuous improvement. Again, when we talk of this, we are talking about the HERA, that is hazard identification and risk assessment, and the aspect impact, the aspect register from which you can have scope for improvement on a continuous basis. So each has to be dealt with separately, and each has to have some scientific way of basically what is that we need to look at. So we have to derive it and then work on that particular area for improvement. Next slide, please. Now we'll look at one by one the context of the organization. We'll understand the clause also, and we'll see as to what is that is requirement of the clause. An organization context involving its operational environment, operating environment, the context must be determined both with the organization, internal and external to the organization. So here we are talking about internal issues as well as external issues. So we have to look into, we have to make a laundry list of the context of the organization, because in the previous, prior to 2015, this was not, there was, this clause was not there, wherein we were looking at this particular aspect after something has gone wrong. That is basically we are talking about corrective action, preventive action. So suppose during your activities, basically there was a non-conformity, so you go for a correction, corrective action, and then further preventive action by horizontally deploying it. So here they have removed this clause of preventive action. You have to basically preempt this by way of understanding the organization context. That is basically risk and opportunities. You have to understand it prior to setting your goals. That is basically setting your objectives. So it is important to understand the unique context of the organization before starting the strategic planning. So it basically becomes a strategic planning, a part of the strategic planning. So it is dovetailing from the top management, that is, it has got an organizational perspective to it. To establish the context means to define external and internal factors that the organization must consider when they manage risk. So when we talk of this aspect, it's a long-term perspective. So we are not focusing on the short-term activity, but it's a long-term activity, say basically 2 to 5 years down the line, wherein we are looking at the external issues which are to a level of the international standards also. So international issues, national and international issues also becomes a part and parcel of this basically clause. How it should respond to the form of defined quality management system. So basically here again our focus when we talk of this particular thing, so it has to be looked from the quality management system as well as the other two systems also, but looking at that particular perspective. Next slide, please. To understand the context means to define the external and internal factors that the organ must consider when they manage risk. So when we talk of you are managing the risk to start with, so basically we are talking about the risk and opportunities. From risk, if you take risk, basically then you get an opportunity for improvement. So we are talking about managing the risk. So how much level you are focusing on, and then you are able to manage the risk. That's more important for us. That's the reason you have to draw a long-term plan. An organization external context includes the outside stakeholders, its local operating environment, as well as the external factors that influence the selection. Then after this, basically we are talking about setting of our goals and targets. The internal stakeholders, its approach to governance, its contractual relationship with its customers, and the capability and the culture in which the organization seeks to achieve its quality goals. So basically our more focus will be on the relationship between the basically the relationship between the customer, what is his requirement, what is our capabilities, whether we can basically cater to his requirement. All those things become, and based on that we need to set our quality goals. Next slide, please. So we are not going into the each and every aspect of it because you have been given the PDF file of this. So the study material is there. So because if we go over each slide by slide, then it will happen that we'll miss on to the whole thing. So our main focus is on getting the framework, understanding the whole management systems, basically per se integrated management system, rather than going into the nitty-gritties of it. So basically, again, this is talking about the detailing part of the context. Basically, how we need to do it. What is that we will look at, how it is that is already given to you. So we'll skip this slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, here we are talking external issues. We need to just look at this. Basically, we are talking about the external issues as well as the systems are concerned. All the three systems, we have to look at the economics of it. We have to look at the international trade condition, competitive product and services. So this is having a long-term perspective with the strategic. So here the involvement of the top management per se is the managing director level, the board of directors basically comes into picture. So from their angle, what is the strategy as far as the business is concerned? So from that angle, we need to look at the whole thing. The competitive product and services, technological trend, the raw material availability and the prices, all those things should be taken into perspective as far as you are addressing the context is concerned. Next slide, please. So I am talking about what is that we need to, I will address more as to how has been given to you. So you can just go through it later on. What area I'll cover more. So here we are again talking about the external, where I have already talked about what do you mean by external. External is the cultural, social, political, legal, regulatory, financial, technological, economic, natural and competitive circumstances. And the internal we are talking about is the activities, products, services, direction, strategies, culture, that is people, knowledge, process, system. So when we talk of the understanding the organization in context, we have to look at the external is that these are the areas, broader areas, and what are the areas under the internal is basically we are looking at the people, knowledge, processes, and the systems. Next slide, please. So this was some exercise basically we are talking about. So we skip that. Interested parties, who are the interested parties? So I'll just in a nutshell, I'll just brief you on the interested party. Interested parties start with your employees. We are talking about the employees, the contract employees. We are talking about the stakeholders. We are talking about the regulatory bodies. We are talking about the neighbors. All those things basically with the bankers. All those things become the interested parties as far as the system is concerned. Next slide, please. So we need to look at their expectations and needs. What are their needs and what are the expectations? Again, the customer. As far as quality management system is concerned, customer is also an interested party. So what is his expectation? What is his need? All those things we need to look from the perspective of the concerned system. Okay, next. Interested parties, then we are talking of relevant interested parties. Okay, next. And what is the requirement? Okay, next. So here there is a list, laundry list of who are the interested parties: employees, customers, competitors, stakeholders, bankers, public authorities, legislators, regulators, politicians and opinion leaders. All those things become the interested parties, NGOs. Next slide, please. Next slide. Here again, we are talking about monitoring and review information about these interested parties and the relevant requirement. So you need to monitor it, review it, and then you have to give them the feedback. So periodic feedback has to be given to the interested parties on this aspect as far as the clause 4.2 is concerned. So you need to give them the feedback. The communication has to be completed. Next slide, please. What are the issues? Basically, we are talking about key economics and market development, technology, innovation. The same thing which we are seeing, this is going into the deeper part of it. Technology, innovation and development, regulatory development. So all those things are under the clause 4.1. Yeah. Next. Political and other instabilities, that also we need to look at. So this is a much broader and deeper perspective as far as the system is concerned. So here the involvement of the top management, the board of directors comes into picture. Organized culture and attitude, that also counts a lot. Next slide, please. Now, when we are talking about compliance obligation, we'll look at mandatory compliance. Mandatory compliance is basically we are talking about all the statutory requirement, the legal requirement becomes a mandatory compliance. Wherein we are talking about various statutory compliances which has to be done under various functions. So those become a mandatory. Voluntary compliance becomes mandatory once you decide to comply with it. So again, when we talk about voluntary compliance, to start with, we are talking about the compliance of the principles. So we have some principles, we have some sister organizations, we have some customers. So those become it, even if it is voluntary compliance, it becomes obligation. It becomes the obligatory part on our part. It becomes obligation on our part to comply with those things. So again, when we talk of ISO systems implementation and certification and continuation of the certification, it becomes a voluntary compliance for us. So those are compliance obligations which we need to follow. Next part. The ethical code, again, those are voluntary compliances. Again, this is basically we are talking about the scope. What is the scope? Organization determine the boundaries. It has the boundaries and applicability of the quality management. So we can look at what has to be considered is external and internal issues, interested parties, maintain a documented information, ensure the conformity of its products and services, and enhancement of customer satisfaction. At the end of the day, customer should be satisfied. So that's the main requirement of quality management system. Next slide, please. So we have to look at, when we talk about quality management system, basically there is the input, there is a process, and there is the output. So what is the input and what is the output? That's more important. We are talking about the process parameters and the required parameters by the customer. The process parameter is the input, then during process, the process parameters has to be properly set and adhered to, and the output parameters has to be looked into. What is the sequence? What is the interactions? Those are all processes. Resource availability. What are the responsibilities and authorities? The structure part of it. The process evaluation for intended results. We were talking about the monitoring and measurement by which we will come to know the intended result, and based on which we can think of process improvement after evaluation. Next slide, please. This clause has been introduced in the year 2015 when ISO 9000:2015 was implemented. This clause was introduced. We'll look at this leadership clause. Next slide, please. So previously there was that the onus was on the management, but it was not spelled out. The whole coordinator to, as far as the system is concerned, was the management representative who was coordinating between the management and the auditor who was looking after the whole of a system. He was the person who was coordinating for the system without getting deeper involvement, or basically he was a common person between the auditor and the management with not much of a responsibility. But now from 2015, that management representative has been removed, and now the ownership lies on the leadership. So let's understand what is that leadership and the commitment of the leadership. Top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment. How it will? Ensuring someone else can do it. That is the quality policy. Because when we talk of top management, it's not necessary that he himself or the top management he has to do, but under his guidance, under his leadership, under his proper advice, the activity should go on. So he should be updated with the things, and the policy should be, when we talk of this leadership, top management, so the top management will get directions from the board of directors. So there is the involvement of the board of directors. The strategy is basically what we are looking at. It should be strategically doubted. That's what we are talking about, the leadership commitment. The policies and objectives are established for quality management systems and are compatible with strategic direction. So strategy is given by the board of directors. And the context of organization is the issues what we are referring to. Previously, basically it was not there. Previously you used to make a policy and work accordingly as far as the policy is concerned. Now the policy is derived after the context of the organization. The issues, so issues, the risk, opportunities, and the issues are addressed, and based on the risk, opportunities, and the issues, the quality objectives are framed. The quality policy is communicated, understood, and applied within the organization. That has to be done. That's the commonality. Integration of quality management systems requirement into the organized business process. This has to be seen. This has to be felt, basically, that it is integrated into the business process. So again, there is the involvement of the top management. It should not be basically in isolation. It's not that the quality management system is something else and the processes, business processes are different. It should be aligned with the business processes. That's what is needed. The resource needed and achieved is intended result from the case. So basically, we are talking about the intended results has to be seen. That means there should be improvement in the business processes which has to be felt during the auditing process, that there is an improvement in the business because of this particular quality management system implementation. Next slide, please. Now we are looking at taking accountability of the effectiveness. Here we are talking of the top management. He has to be accountable. He can basically delegate. He can delegate his responsibility down the line, but he becomes accountable for effectiveness of the system. So the responsibility lies with him, the accountability lies with him, but he can share or he can delegate his responsibility down the line, but at the end of the day, accountable is he. Promoting awareness of process approach, we are talking about, it's a risk-based approach, it's a process approach. Communicating the importance of effective quality management system and of conforming the quality management system requirement. This is again a common, this is nothing new. Engaging, directing, and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness. So his involvement is there as far as the leadership is concerned. What is the role of leader? He has to be directive, he has to direct, he has to support. That's what his role is. He has to engage. promoting continual improvement and innovation. Again, innovation, when we talk of innovation, that is the involvement of people. So the continual improvement and innovation, wherein you involve people, there is a contribution that we are talking about employee engagement that becomes a part of innovation. Supporting other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it is. So they have to support the other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership. It should be felt, it should be seen. So again, we are talking about it applies to other areas of responsibilities also. Next slide, please. When we talk of leader, he has to be customer focused. The whole focus should be on the customer. Here we are talking about as far as quality is concerned, as far as safety, as far as environment is concerned, again a larger picture, that's a neighbor. Okay, so we are talking about the customer focus, top management and demonstrate with respect to customers. So we are talking about the interested parties comes into picture. So they are committed to the issues and needs of the interested parties. Needs determination of applicability, statutory and regulatory requirement. That's more important. Risk and opportunities that can affect conformity of products and services in enhancing customer satisfaction. So that's what we are talking about, the customer focus. Customer focus is basically the regulation is the main thing. Then we are talking about the risk and opportunities, what we have envisaged, and then what is that customer asked for. Next slide. So go back. Here, when we talk of enhancing customer satisfaction, it's enhancing, it's not meeting customer satisfaction. When we talk of enhancing, it's customer delight. So there are some standards which talks about basically the guidelines for how to improve or further improve your standard. So this is basically the standard what we are now. It is the implementation standard. Basically, we are talking about for certification. But if you want to enhance your standard, so there are basically standards, ISO standards, wherein there are guidelines how you can further improve your standards. Next slide, please. This is a simple, we are talking about the policy, responsibility for formulating quality policy and must implement, document, communicate. This is the common thing. There is nothing new about it. It's in line with the previous standards only. The next slide, please. We have to communicate it again. This is not a new thing. This is again a old thing. It's a continuation of the old thing. Next slide, please. Roles and responsibilities, again, these are common things. We are talking about this is a top-down approach. Defining roles is a function of planning. So under planning, it will be there. You have to define the roles of each function. Ensuring awareness can then be achieved through communicating and training. So that much needed. Organizing to use job descriptions or procedures. How part comes into picture. How you will do that through job descriptions or procedures. To define responsibilities and authorities. There is a clear expectation from consistency and appropriate process ownership from top to bottom approach within an organization. So basically, there should be always a consistency in your processes and your expectations. The results should be consistent. So expectations are very clear as far as roles and responsibilities are concerned from the management. Next slide. Now coming to the planning. When we talk of action to address risk and opportunities, considering need to be specific, identify internal and external issues that already we have seen. How now? Basically, we are talking about how we need to do that, the action part of it. How we need to do that. Achieve its intended result. The action, basically, the internal and external issues. What has to be done is we have to look at achieving the intended result. What is the result, end result of it? Enhance desirable effect. Basically, you need to reach to that particular effect, prevent or reduce undesired effect. So we have to reduce or prevent undesirable effect and achieve improvement. So at the end of the day, to addressing the internal and external issues, you need to look at the way that the results are achieved and there is an improvement in the system. Next slide, please. As far as risk and opportunity is concerned, basically you need to, from this, you need to further work on the aspect register and the HIRA register. So this is something which is a laundry list with you. Not necessary that this risk and opportunities is just a guidelines. It's a laundry list with you, wherein over a period of time you can seek information from that and work on it for further improvement. But you need to do a homework. This is a basic primary homework for any organization to be done, which was missing prior to 2015. Prior to 2015, it was starting with the aspect register and the HIRA, not with the risk and opportunity. Organization shall plan risk and opportunities, integrate and implement the actions, evaluate the effectiveness. Risk and opportunity shall be proportionate to the potential impact on conformity of products and services. It should be directly proportional to the potential impact of conformity of products and services. Next slide, please. So this standard is talking about risk-based thinking. So risk-based thinking is basically you have to preempt the risk. You have to envisage the risk. You have to think of the risk and then work accordingly. The concept of risk has been implicit in ISO. That's what I already said, and more explicit and built it into the whole quality management system. Risk-based thinking is already part of, it's a process approach. Next slide. What is risk? Risk is the possibility of event or activities obstructing of achievement of an organized strategies and operational objectives. Possibility of an event. So basically we are talking about, it's a potential volatility of potential outcome. It's a potential outcome. So we preempt, like before it comes, we look at that there is something which is coming. So we are aware of those things. So that's a potential outcome. That is what is called as the risk. Yeah, next slide. Risk-based thinking makes preventive action part of the routine. So you have taken that preventive action in your stride. Okay, you are starting with the preventive action. Risk is often though of only in a negative sense. Risk-based thinking can also help to identify opportunities. So when we look at the risk, we are talking about it's a negative sense, but it gives you an opportunity for improvement. Because looking at the risk, what we do is that you measure the risk and you start working on it. So it's an opportunity for you for improvement. You are put to risk. So basically, if you preempt those things, you are looking at the potential thing. Basically, based on that, you work on that particular thing and overcome that particular risk instead of you getting a jolt or you getting a surprises out of that particular risk. So that's how you need to work on that. This can be considered to be a positive side of risk. Because you preempt, that becomes a positive. All of a sudden something comes, so you take it, basically get surprises, and then at that particular junction you are not aware as to what and how you need to tackle that particular situation. But when you work on it, when you basically look at those things, and you can prepare a strategy for it, so how you can overcome that particular risk. Yeah, next. Risk can be defined by two parameters. One is severity. How serious it is. Severity. Seriousness of the harm. To what extent it is. Severity is basically seriousness is we are talking about it can go to what extent. And probability is harm will occur. Harm will occur and how. Likelihood of and how severe it is. That is what we are talking about is the risk. Next slide. Why should we adopt risk-based thinking? Improve customers' confidence and satisfaction. Because something what customer wants, if we preempt it, what will happen? Basically, you will gain confidence of the customer and he will be definitely satisfied. That is what basically, before he tells you something and you preempt it and you offer him it to the customer. Okay, so definitely it will be a delight for the customer. Assure consistency of quality of goods and services. So it's a consistency. Something improvement what we are talking about, before we have some parameters in mind, and when we talk of parameters, and we are already looking at some gray areas prior to that. So what it means basically, like you are looking at something improvement, and then that improvement becomes a consistency, that becomes a benchmark. Establish a proactive culture. Again, it's a proactive culture of prevention and improvement. So there can't be any wrong thing, because you are having a proactive approach towards everything. Before anything goes wrong, or only not only wrong, but I am talking of anything, any improvement. So that's what is basically a proactive step for further improvement in that particular area. We are talking of, suppose when we talk about customer's requirement, there is a range for that customer, and then range is shortened. Again, this is talking about the proactive culture. We are shortening the range, means you are giving him the material to a closer or a better quality. In spite of he giving a broader range, you are proactively looking at that particular activity and narrowing the range. That means you are giving him a better quality. Successful companies intuitively take a risk-based approach. So we are talking about successful companies takes a risk-based approach. What do you mean by risk-based approach? You want to improve. You want to improve on that particular aspect. You want to see basically the gray areas of that particular aspect, so that you have seen that gray area, you're working on that gray area, and you're getting rid of that gray area. That means you're talking about improvement in that. So we need not work on the areas. We need to go back and see that something basically which we have got a scope for further improvement. That's what we are talking about, is the risk-based approach, rather than basically giving what is expected only. Next slide, please. Here we are looking at the quantitative part of it. We are looking at the probability and the severity. That's what basically probability is, likelihood of it happening and how serious it can be. So we are talking about high is in the red zone and low is in the green zone. So we need to move from red to green. That is what our approach should be. So we have to lower the severity, so that basically we lie in the green zone. That's what we have to look at, and the probability has also to be reduced. Let's see severity of harm. S5 is catastrophic, S4 is critical, and S1 is negligible. The severity 1 is negligible, which is the green zone. S2 is basically we are talking about the minor thing. So we need to always move from red to green. So we have to reduce the severity for everything. So basically, suppose severity is on higher side, so risk priority of that you need to take for improvement, so that if we reduce that particular severity and reduce the risk. Next slide, please. Here we can see the severity and the probability, the reverse part of it qualitatively. We move probability on higher side, severity on higher side. So we increase the risk. If severity and probability is on the higher side, the risk is increased. Next slide, please. This risk acceptance. So again, when we talk of risk, you always have to take a risk. Otherwise, there won't be any activities happening. Okay. Any activities, for any activity to happen or any work to be done, you have to take a risk. So when we talk of here risk acceptance, what is that risk what we are taking? Whether it is acceptable, as low as reasonable, practicable. That is what is LR as far as safety is concerned. The LR is a terminology which is used in safety, industrial safety. So as low, risk is as low as reasonably practicable. So that is the acceptable risk what we are talking about. Beyond which it becomes unacceptable. So generally acceptable is the commonalities of, because any activity what you do, you are put to risk, which is commonly acceptable. Alarm is, that is the maximum, as low as reasonable, practicable. So if till that time, that's the boundary for you, that risk what you are taken is a boundary for you, beyond which it becomes unacceptable. acceptance of risk also is equally important. It all depends on the frequency and the severity. How frequent that particular risk you are taking and how severe it can be. So you have to balance both the things and you have to be in that particular quadrant. Next slide, please. So organization manages a risk where quality gates fail, consequence can be devastating. So when the quality gate fails, what it may consequence can be devastating. So beyond a particular level, that's the reason for when we talk of any material, they don't talk of a particular unit. They are talking about the range. So range is from the lower range to the higher range. The whatever material you use, it should be in that particular range. If it goes beyond the range, that means it is devastating. That means devastating is basically it is beyond the acceptance. The quality is beyond the acceptance. So that means it will be rejected. Basically, we are looking at that particular gate. The gate fails, that means it is beyond that. Let's look at that highly influential low cost because we are looking at those things also. Like we are looking at the optimization part of it, cost optimization, what we are referring to. High influence, low cost, defenses and depth, and low influences, high cost. The contract or project failure. So how it can happen? Basically, what can happen? So you have to look at it in a proper sense. What is that we are looking at? That's more important. So they have given you a range. There is contract requirement, design part of it, acquisition, makeup or buy, process development, production readiness, text and acceptance, operation services. Okay. Beyond which we look at the low influential, high cost. Next slide, please. Organization, objectives and planning. So now we have seen at basically risk and opportunities. For getting this thing, basically we need to look at the risk and then what are the opportunities. From the risk, the opportunities are developed. Based on which basically you need to set your objectives for improvement. So organization shall establish and ensure quality objectives. The objectives shall be consistent with the quality policy. Because once you set risk and opportunities, then you define your quality policy. In the quality policy, you will basically, what do you mean by quality policy? It's the intent of the organization. It's the intent of the organization in that particular area. That is, when you talk of quality management system, they are talking about the quality part of it. Quality management system, they are talking about quality part of it. And what is that we intend to do? A broader picture. And now when we talk of objective and planning, it's very specific. It's smart objectives what we are talking about with time-bound measurables. We look at that. A quality objective should be consistent with the quality. It should be in line with the quality policy. Quality policy is a broader picture. Objective is more precise. So, and then that it should be in line with the policy. It should be measurable. Here we need to be clearly defining the measure. In policy, we don't give any measures, but in your objectives, you give measures. Applicable requirement, what is that is required. Enhancement of customer satisfaction. So it has to be in line with the customer satisfaction. The objective should be in line with customer satisfaction, means what is that is required. If you require certain range of product, so that is what should be in a part of your objective, that you will be improving in your quality parameters, because that is what is customer's requirement, which will satisfy the customer. Basically, it has to be quality objective should be monitored. It has to be monitored on a regular basis, because when we talk about objective, it is for certain duration, that you will be meeting your objective in a period of time, that is say one year or say 6 month objective. So we have to monitor it on a regular basis by looking at it to see that whether it is in line with what is being talked about, and whether it is meeting that particular, or it is in line with that objective which is being met. So when we talk of monitor, suppose if I have an objective of improvement over a period of 6 months, and after each 2 months I need to see that whether it is in line of meeting the objectives, whether I will be able to meet that objective after 6 months. So whether it is in line with that particular meeting the objective, or it is going the other way around. So basically that's the reason it has to be monitored on a regular basis. Why it has to be communicated? Each function in that particular loop should know where are we on that particular quality objective. Updated as appropriate. Suppose if we are not in a position to meet the objectives, we need to see that we have to revise it. It can be other way around. It can be prior objectives can be met prior to the date set, or then we need to extend it. So either way, basically it should be updated as appropriate. But it can't happen that we are not meeting the objectives and then basically we are writing that the objectives can be met by so and so day. It has surpassed that, and then even then after that also the objectives, the parameters are much below the set parameters. So it should not happen. So it has to be regularly updated as appropriate. Maintain documented information. So it has to be communicated and the information has to be maintained on a regular basis. So use 5W1H principle. Procedures. Basically, meeting the objectives will be through what? It's from with who, what, when, how it will be done. So 5W1H is the basis to meet the objective. Next, organization shall consider change and their potential consequences. Planning of change. So not necessarily every time whatever you set your objectives, it will be achieved. So you have to have planning of change. Change and their potential consequences. We need to know that. So any changes, we need to have in our system the planning of changes our system. Consequences can be dealt with, and we make aware ourselves as to what are the consequences if there is any changes in the planning. Integrity of the quality systems again should be considered. What are the resources available required? Basically, change in case of change, planning of change. What are the resources available that has to be looked at? And the allocation and reallocation of responsibility. Because if you are changing some plans, so all those things go haywire, and accordingly we need to make changes in your system. So you need to be tuned to the requirement of planning of change. Next slide, please. Hazard versus risk. We'll look at this. By looking at this picture, we will come to know what is that hazard and what is risk. Hazard is danger or harm sources. So you can look at this lion. Because there is no person here, no one can be attacked by the lion. Hazard is there. Danger or harm. Hazard is the lion being present over there. Hazard. Now, when there is a risk, danger or harm factor. Because there is a person here, this person can be attacked by the lion. That's a risk. The lion was a hazard. Somebody in front of the lion becomes a risk. Next slide, please. Beware of bull. Bull is there. Hazard is there. Risk is there. People are there. Risk is there. There is some fence. That is what we are talking about. Minimizing the risk. That is what is minimizing the risk. Hazard is bull. Risk is people, the children's go there. But we are minimizing the risk by putting the fence. Next slide, please. Hazard originating outside the workplace. Yeah. Next. Outside the workplace. Okay. Some activity is going on far off, or something is there and all of a sudden it burns. You can see that. Okay. Hazard originating outside the workplace. Next. Actually, when we talk of that area, it's a workplace, but it's a remote place because the thing is that no one is over there. That's the reason we are talking about outside the workplace. Hazard originating in the vicinity of the workplace, wherein there is a manual intervention, is in the vicinity of the workplace. So person is working and there is a hazard. Yeah. So tank farm, when we talk of tank farm and there is no one near the tank farm, it is remotely controlled. So we are talking about outside the workplace. But actually, it's not the outside the workplace, it is inside the workplace only. But because you are operating from the control rooms, we talk about outside the workplace. But the tank farm is a part and parcel of the workplace only. But there is no risk involved to a person because there is no physical presence of any person. Infrastructure, equipment, and material at workplace. We can see this. Workplace, we have equipments, materials at workplace. Next. Next. Go on putting. Yeah. These are some examples and equipment and material at workplace. These are some examples of infrastructure, equipments, and materials at workplace. Yeah. When we talk about workplace doesn't mean only factory. Yeah? Any workplace. We are generalizing it. Some are in factories, some are basically transportation in transit. Okay. Some are the equipments. Yeah. Next. Temporary modification. We'll go back. Temporary modification. Temporary changes. At times we do what is in layman's or in Hindi, what we talk about is a jugaad, temporary modification, which can be a dangerous thing, which can put person under risk. It's hazardous. Temporary modification, what you say in the chemical industries, it can be at times catastrophic. Most of the accidents, most of the disasters has taken place because of this temporary modification. Okay, you can see this bellows, which are put. It's a temporary modification which has been done. Next slide. Design of work area, process, installation, machinery, equipment. Yeah. Next. A workplace, before new measures were introduced, the worker is strongly bent forward at a workbench that is too low with too little room for her leg. This is pertaining to the ergonomic part of it. Her positioning during working. The person is under stress, under strain. So the performance is affected, and in turn, basically, there is the it's the occupational hazard for that person to work. There will be a fatigue caused due to the operation. Next. Here you can see very comfortably working, operating the machine. Comfortably operating the machine. So output is also more, the person is at ease, productivity improves, no strain. There is a redesigned workstation with arm supports and adjustable height. An electromechanical system is used to incline. Next. Environmental aspects and impact. What do you mean by this? We are now into environment, aspect and impact. What is that? Activity, product and services. So how the environmental aspects are generated? It is from the activity, product or services. Some activity what you do in the organization, it can result out of the product or the services. Services, basically we are talking more of a transportation services, any other services, any services. So activity, product or services, the aspect is the cause and impact is the effect. Okay. Next slide. Activity, we can take an example. Activity is use of computer is activity. When you use a computer, what will happen is that it will consume electricity, is the aspect. Because aspect related to the environment will consume electricity. When we talk of environment, what is that aspect we are talking about, which can affect the environment by what are the essential elements of the environment? It is air, water, flora, fauna, natural resources. So electricity is one of the natural resources. So consumption of electricity is the aspect. And what is the impact? Depleting of energy resources. So energy will be depleted to that extent. What has been consumed by the electricity, though energy will be depleted, that will be the impact. Next slide, please. Here, activity is delivery of goods by suppliers. Aspect is use and disposal of packing material. The packing material is used and disposed. So what happens is that the packing material at the end of the day, you need to throw it out to create an unlimited solid waste. It is the solid waste which is created. Again, it can be correlated to the natural resource also, because if it is paper, food, craft, whatever is there, so those are natural resources. So that also can be one of the impact. Here it is, we are talking about a disposal of solid waste. Again, can be an impact. Basically, it can be unlimited solid waste which is generated. Handling of the solid waste can be an impact. Generation of solid waste can be an impact. Next slide, please. See here the aspect is coal. This is fire. The effect that an environmental aspect can have on the environment. When we talk of a coal, it's burning. What will be the output of it? The fume, the carbon dioxide, the SO2, NOx, all those things. So it will affect the environment. So we are talking about the air pollution. So when we talk of anything like this affecting an environment, it can have effect, positive or negative impact on the environment. I'm not talking of this activity, but we are talking about the activity of basically planting the trees. What will happen by planting the trees? It will have a positive impact on the environment, because it will absorb oxygen and give, it will absorb the carbon dioxide and give oxygen. So planting of tree is a positive environmental aspect. Next slide, please. Aspect environmental interaction. Basically, there is it's a cycle. How does the organization interact with the environment? Because when we talk of the latest ISO 40,000-2015, we are talking about life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment is important thing which is added in 2015, which was not there in the previous standard. From cradle to grave, that is what we are looking at. So here we are looking at various aspects or facets of environment. Noise, which will have a impact on the environment. Odor, again we are talking about odor, contamination of land, air pollution, energy use, solid and liquid waste generation, process water drain, groundwater contamination. All those things basically are the aspect and impact. Aspect which can impact the environment because of your activities, services or products. Here we can again see the activities, various activities, what we are referring to. Process flow diagram, identify inputs and outputs and relate to impacts. There's some small exercise, raw material input, energy input. Then there is the activity. To the activity, what will be there? Gaseous emissions will be there. There can be noise generation, liquid effluent, there can be spillage, product or services, there can be, basically we are talking about the transportation, we are talking about the packaging material which is liberated, the waste which is liberated, disposal by the customers, disposal of the packaging material. All those things will be the impact to the environment. Next slide, please. What are controls and influences, basically? Boundary of influence. So this is what, when we talk of the boundary of influence, that is under your scope. Because when we talk of an organization, what is the scope of an organization? As I told you, it is, we are talking about is cradle to grave. Life cycle assessment is what an industry should look at as far as ISO 14,000 is concerned. Here we are looking at the boundaries of control. Okay, boundaries of control is there and boundaries of influence is there. So influence and control. So now the whole system is talking about boundaries of influence, not only control. Previously they were talking about boundaries of controls. Now we are talking about boundaries of influence. Raw material inputs, energy inputs, basically various emissions we are looking at. These are under boundaries of control. Once it is going out of your workplace or from your boundaries, we are talking about use and disposal by the customer. Again, boundaries of influence, which again is the scope of ISO 14,000. We are talking of cradle to grave approach. Next slide. What comes first, aspect or policy? So we are talking about now policy follows the aspect. List environment aspects through initial review or use of processes model inputs. Evaluate, determine significant aspect, define environmental policy. Because once you evaluate and determine significant aspect, you will come to know what are the risk priority numbers. Basically, as the risk priority is high, you need to take that becomes a significant aspect for you, and that you need to take for improvement. So it should be a part and parcel of your improvement system. So when we talk about improvement, so you talk about those policies wherein the intent of the management has to be reflected through the policies. The areas where you will be working on will be reflected through the significant aspect, which is we are talking about the aspect which has got a more risk priority numbers. So the first will be the aspect which will guide you to prepare your policy, and then we are talking about the objectives, targets, and programs. Next slide, please. Techniques of environment impact assessment. We look at the techniques: risk assessment methodology, nature of hazard, probability of occurrence, consequence of effect. That is what consequence of effect, and then it is basically we are talking about risk priority number. So here we are talking about FMEA, that is failure mode effect analysis, criteria based evaluation. This is how we have to evaluate the risk priority number based on failure mode effect analysis. You have to look at the quantity of the aspect generated, what is the occurrence probability, what is the detection you do, how frequently you do, that is once in a month, once in fortnight, once in a week, once in 6 months, once in a year. That is the detection. What is the consequence? What is the consequence of this particular aspect? Whether there is a legislation associated to this environmental aspect, and what are your controls? That has to be looked into. Next slide, please. Risk assessment methodology. Basically, we have already seen nature of hazard, probability of occurrence, and consequence of effect. Next slide. Here it is one and the same. Here it is basically more going into the detail part of it. What can be the nature of hazard? We are talking about it. Is it solid, liquid, gases? What is that quantity which is generated? Here again we are going into the deeper part of it, the toxicity of it, the duration of it, and the extent of it. Probability of occurrence, we are talking of continuous emission from normal operation. We are talking of real-time continuous happening. We are talking about normal operation, and then we are talking about abnormal, and then we are talking about emergency also to a certain extent, which is missing in this. Failure of controls we are looked at, and the extreme condition, and the consequence. That is, what is the toxicity, whether it is reversible, irreversible. So what is the impact? So this is impact assessment consideration, impact assessment. Next slide, please. This is how the risk priority number is derived at. R is the environmental impact, P is the probability of occurrence, and S is the severity of effect. That is what is the consequence. P into S is usually given a score of 1, 2 to 5. So what is basically once we are talking about the risk priority number beyond certain figure, so all those things becomes a certain. We have to derive our number, give them significance, and anything above that particular level becomes a significant aspect as far as the risk is concerned. Next slide, please. This is a matrix, probability and severity matrix. Probability high and low, consequences basically low consequence and severe consequence. So this is the matrix by which you can get RPN number out of it, probability of severity or consequence becomes the risk. Next slide, please. A role of impact assessment, a technique of ensuring appropriate management control, priority improvement. What these basically activities take you to? what is that control we need to exercise? Basically, whether the probability of occurrence is more, whether the risk, the severity is more, where we need to tap. That's what we need to know. So we can basically, this is giving you appropriate control measures. What is that control we need to exercise? The hierarchy of controls. What is that we are looking at? Basically, we are talking about elimination. We are talking of substitution. Whether it is engineering controls, basically, whether we are talking about administrative controls or we need to give them PPEs. So these are all the management controls which we need to exercise to lower the risk priority number. And then prioritizing improvement criteria. What is that priorities we need to take for improvement? Focus on consequence rather than probability. So your whole focus will be on the consequence rather than probability of occurrence. What is that consequence? Higher the consequence, basically, more focus or more priority we need to give on that particular area. Involve cross-functional teams. Why we are talking about cross-functional team involvement? Because we look at that particular aspect on a day-to-day basis, but the third eye will be in a position to tell you better, and that can be something basically wow effect to that. So cross-functional team always helps you with a better idea and better solution, which helps you in improving that particular area. So that's why you need to improve the cross-functional team. Involve the cross-functional team. Thank you. We
Yes,
will
sir.
break. Break
Sir,
for 10 minutes.
yes, break for sir, maybe it's a 5 minute. I hope you all are enjoying the session. So here in between this, we have a 5 minute, you can say as a bio break or just a relaxation break. In between, those are here to see this presentation. So we have some exercise for your brainstorming. So now after this, you just complete this exercise. We have some crosswords related to fire and safety. So whoever choose and give a numbers of fire and safety terms, they get a some prize after this session. So can you move for a next slide? Yes. So we'll take a 5 minutes. Again, we'll back on 5:40. Then I'll quickly ask a answer. So those have given an answer faster, then they get a prize. So you can unmute yourself, then give a number. Okay, this is the number. Then we'll decide. We'll share the result and after this session. Okay. Uh, okay. So anywhere, anyone have done this? No, no one have completed.
I'm
Anyone,
not just
anyone.
3 words.
Pardon?
Total 3 words, sir.
Total 3 words. What's your name, boss?
Manideep, sir.
Pradeep. Okay, thank you, Pradeep.
Manideep, sir. Manideep.
Pradeep. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, so only one person have done this. No problem. I'll tell you the answer after this. Sir, please, just I am hand over to you. You can start the session again.
Okay.
Sir, please repeat the question. Sorry.
I have not asked any question. What I am saying, I'll share you the answer after this session.
Okay, okay. Please ask questions.
Yes, please, sir. We have to start the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So till now, we have completed clause 4 to clause 6. 4, 5, 6. It was talking about it because when we talk of this particular systems, it is a PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, and act. So we have completed the planning stage. Clause number 4 to 6, we are talking about it's a planning stage. So to plan. Now we are talking about resources. For doing, you require resources. For do, now we have to perform. So for perform, clause 7, we are talking about do factor. So do is basically is doing. So it starts with 7.1 clause. Clause number 7, which is talking about the support, and 7.1 is talking about the resource. Okay, let's see what are the resources we are looking at. organization shall consider capability and constraint of existing internal resources, because you have to look at the capabilities and the constraints. All because what is requirement of the standards, basically what is the standard required, how to comply for meeting the standard, or basically implementation of the system, what is that is required. The standard doesn't talk of that you require this many people, this many. Standard talks about these are the activities which has to be done. Okay, for doing that activity, whether you are capable, whether you have some constraints, resource constraints are there, all those things. Basically, when we talk of resource, it's not only resource, we are talking about manpower resource, we are talking about the finance constraints, we are talking about the technology, all those things become the resource. Okay, so let's look at the capability and the constraint of existing internal resources, that you have to study that prior to basically going in. For needs from the external providers, again, what are the needs from the external providers? What is that they are expecting out of you? Hello, I'm not getting the screen. I'm not getting the screen. Yeah. So we are talking about here, we start with people. Organization shall consider person necessary for effective implementation of QMS. So what is that persons what we will be requiring for implementation of the quality management system, if we say. Operation and control of its process. So for what people is required for operation and control of the processes. Okay, next. Again, the second part is resource support part is we are talking about the infrastructure. What is that infrastructure? What will we are talking about? The organization shall determine, provide, and maintain the infrastructure towards conformity of products and services. So, what is that infrastructure we are talking about? Is building and associated utilities, structure and the utilities, equipment including hardware and software, transportation resources, information and communication technology. Whether it is basically in line with the requirement. The requirement of what? The customer, what is that customer output is required. So whether for meeting those outputs, whether it is sufficient, the building and associated utilities are there, proper are there, equipments are there, transport resources are, all those things becomes a part and parcel of your support process. Next. The organization shall determine, provide, and maintain infrastructure towards conformity and product. So basically, whatever resource, whatever infrastructure is required, it should be in line. So it should conform to a product and services and the requirement of the customer. Here again, when we look at this, environment can be a combination of human and physical factors. So here we are talking about environment. What do you mean by environment? It's human and physical factors, social, non-discriminatory, calm, non-confrontation. So the atmosphere should be in such a manner. It should be social. What is that social we are talking about? Non-discriminatory. There should not be any discrimination. That is what the standard talks about. Should be calm. So the atmosphere should be the conducive atmosphere and non-confrontational. There should not be any fight between the people. Okay, so this is what they are referring to as a social. The psychological is basically stress reducing. We have seen one example wherein we looked at the ergonomic part of it. So it should be stress relieving, burnout prevention. So the atmosphere, the RH factor, the air changes, all those things should be in a proper way so that there should not be more stress, there should not be more strain on a person. Emotionally protective. This is what we are talking about is psychological. And physical, we are talking about temperature, humidity, light, airflow. This is work environment. So these are all the consideration of environment which the management or the leader has to look at. So this is what we are talking about, the infrastructure part of it. Next. The resource pertaining to monitoring and measurement. Okay, here we are talking about suitable for specific type of monitoring and measurement activity. The organization shall ensure suitable for specific type of monitoring and measurement, whatever is the requirement, are maintained to ensure that continuing fitness. So whether that particular equipment is fit or not. Again, it should be continuous fit. Appropriate documented information is evidence of fitness. So documented information is we are talking about the calibration part of it, that particular the instrument, the equipment. Basically, we are talking about should be calibrated, should be tested. Next. Measuring equipment shall be calibrate protocol. What is the protocol of that particular calibration? What is the status, validity, safeguard from adjustment? It should not be open for adjustment, damage or deterioration. So this is what is the requirement of the standard as far as that monitoring and measurement resources are concerned. Those should be in a proper condition. So what is that condition has been mentioned to a certain extent. Next. So organization knowledge. When we talk organization knowledge shall be maintained, made available to the extent of necessary change, need and trend. So this is, we are talking about the knowledge part of it, of the organization, the resource. Basically, we are talking about, there we are talking about the competence. As far as ISO 14000 and ISO 45000 is concerned, they are talking about the competence part of it. Here, in particular 7.1.6 of ISO 9000, they are talking about the organization knowledge. So knowledge has to be maintained, made available to the extent of necessary. When we talk of knowledge, knowledge doesn't mean of a person. Knowledge means also repository, like some document, some notes, some literature, all those things become a knowledge part of it. Made available to the extent of necessary, lesson learned from. Go back. Yeah. Made available to the extent necessary, changing needs and trends. It should be in line with the changing needs and trends. Consideration of current knowledge. So latest information should be there. Necessary additional knowledge. Update should be there. All those things should be readily available. Here, when we talk of knowledge, we are talking of the statutory also. Everything, whatever is a part and parcel of the organization. It's not only pertaining to equipment or anything. It is everything. Whatever functional activities are there, the legal person should have the legal update. The process should have a process parameters. So this is what we are talking about, the knowledge part of it. The quality person should have the latest testing standard. All those things become a knowledge for that concerned function. Next. Knowledge can be based on internal source, intellectual properties. So not necessary that everything should be yours or internal only. Gain from experience, lesson learned from failures and success projects, capturing and sharing undocumented knowledge and experiences, the result of improvement in the process. So it can be acquired from any source, but it should not be deficient. It should not happen that I don't have a knowledge from any means. That's the reason I am not able to perform or I am not able to give the result. That is what it is talking about. By any means, it should be available. It should be acquired so that your work doesn't suffer. You get the ultimate results. Next slide. Here again, they are talking about it can be from any means, external source, some standards, some academic conferences. So these are some clues. So based on these clues, you can gather this information. See, that's how the beauty of the standard. They are giving you a direction. The standards, the internet standard talk shows you the way, the direction, how you can acquire those things. So this is the means to acquire. Conferences, gathering knowledge from customers or external providers, all those things become part and parcel of your knowledge. Yeah, next. Now we are talking about the competence. Basically, competence is again, as far as 14,000 is concerned, ISO 45,000 is a necessary competence of a person is again needed. That person should be competent. Even the laboratory, in the laboratory, a person who is performing, the chemist, he should be competent enough. evaluate the effectiveness of the action taken. He should be in a position to evaluate the effectiveness of action which is he takes. Retain appropriate document evidence. So he has to retain any documented information as evidence, because how do we know that he is a competent person? So he should, whatever knowledge he has acquired. So all those things basically should be through a documented information which he proves that he shows that he is a competent person, has to be maintained. Next. Now, when we talk of a system, system is a top-down, and it should not be limited to only top. It is top-down approach. When we talk of top-down approach, down the line person, be it a worker, be it a contract person, be it what do you call a visitor, be it a guest, everyone should be aware of at least the basics of the system. So the interested parties, so what is that is should be known to those people is the awareness part of it. The awareness contains what? The awareness talks about the policy. Policy doesn't talk about that person should mug up the policy, but he should know the extract of that policy. He should know what is that policy talks about. What are the objectives taken by the organization? At least the departmental person should know what are the objectives taken by that function, by his department. So that is the awareness level to be created by the employer to the employees. Effectiveness of quality management system is seen by the awareness. Benefits of improved performance. So each person who is performing the function should know what is that improvement is expected of him, and what is that improvement, what he has gained will help him to better his particular system. Implementation of not conforming with QMS. So he should know implications. What is the particular implication? There is non-conformance. What can be the worst case scenario? What is the implication on the QMS system? That he needs to know about it. So that is what the awareness which has to be given to the concerned person. Next. Now when we look at the communication part of it, internal and external, what will be communicated? So with the organized should be very clear. Not necessarily each and everything should be communicated to each and every person. Not necessary. But they need to be very clear that to what has to be communicated, to whom is to be communicated, what has to be restricted, all those things basically management should be very clear about it. So what it will communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, how to communicate, and who communicates. All those things should be very clear. So communication has to be done, the requisite communication has to be done with the required person. That is there. But if you define that we will communicate this thing to these people, it has to be done in a planned manner, in a periodic way. So this is what we are talking about, the communication part. The external communication, what we are referring to is to the interested parties, wherein we seek their inputs, basically through their issues, whatever is their issues, and then we are talking about their, if they have any problems, if they have any grievances, that it has to be addressed by us. Next. Documented information. Here, as I told you, previously it was documentation and records. Now it is talking about information. It can be in any form. So we are talking about extent of document information can include size, organization, type of activities, processes, complexity of process, interaction, and competence of the person. So this should be basically documented, in short, documented information. Next. So what has to be done with the documented information? We are talking about it should be available and suitable for use. Adequate it has to be properly protected. Suppose if it is in soft form, some drawings are there. So it should not be that it should be highly confidential with proper controls over it. The controls has to be exercised even if it is in any form. So we can't lose control on the documented system, because this is the system and it has to be basically controlled. It has to be issued by the concerned person only. Yeah, there should be no loss of integrity. Next. Next slide. So what is that? This is again the old thing: distribution, access, retrieval and use, storage and preservation, including preservation of legibility, control of change, retention and disposition. What we have to see that you have to spell out: I will retain it for so many years, I dispose it of after so many years. How it is that I will be disposing? What is the process of disposition that I need to talk about? External origin, identify and control anything, any document from external origin that should be properly identified, and that should be a control exercise. So again, information retained, protected for unintended alteration. Anything which is being protected, it should be from unintended alteration. No alteration should be done. Archive, what we talk about. So there should not be any fiddling with that particular document. Next. Next slide, please. Training, provide knowledge and skills. Awareness, having knowledge. Competence, demonstrating knowledge and skills. What do you mean by training, awareness and competence? We are talking about here as a competence. Okay. Training, providing knowledge and skills. Awareness is having knowledge. Awareness has to be given to all in the system, and competence will be with some persons who are performing critical activities. Okay. Next. Training should provide understanding and OHS requirement, awareness, roles and responsibilities, emergency preparedness. That is must, because even the visitor should know what is the emergency preparedness to improve the management system. To ensure an effective OHSMS, we need to have this competency, training and awareness. Okay, next. Training procedures shall take into account differing levels: responsibility, ability, language skills and literacy, risk. Competence based on education, training and experience shall be identified. Competence is basically based on education, training and skills, and the job what he performs in the organization. That is more critical function, critical job pertaining to the areas, basically functional areas which are critical, should be looked after by a competent person who is given in-depth training on that particular job. Yeah. Next. Content of awareness training may include awareness, organization policy, skill enhancement, management specific procedural practices. All those things will be a part and parcel of the awareness of risk. Procedure practice is also much important, because all the operators, workers, contract workers should know what is expected of them. That is, we are talking about the safe operating procedures. You need to be aware of those things. Next. You need to do a competency mapping, like you need to have his education, experiences, what is his skill set, and what are the trainings to be given to that concerned person. So all these things, the management should decide on to each functional and the role, which training has to be given based on the level of that particular person. Next, level function. Next. This is one of the examples which has been shown. Internal communication. Next slide. Next. Internal communication. So basically, we are talking about key positions, particular persons who work may create impact on so and so OHMS. Whether internal communication method and line of communication has been identified and established between positions, whether communication are effective. So basically, we need to give them this information also on internal communication. What should be the communication which should be done in the organization on as far as the system is concerned. Next. External, what we are talking about is the interested parties, the regulators, neighbors, media, customers, financial institutions, pressure group, emergency services, procedures established in terms of receiving, documenting, responding to external communication. So it's a two-way communication. It can't be one-way communication. It will be always two-way communication, wherein we receive communication from them, we respond to their communication, respond to their issues, or their grievances which has been raised. Next. Participation in consultation is the focus area as far as occupational health safety management system is concerned. What is that we are talking about? Workers' participation. So workers' participation where? We are talking about workers' participation in various safety committees, appropriate involvement in HIRA. HIRA is risk, hazard identification and risk assessment, where when you identify the hazard, the worker, the operator who is working on that particular machine or that equipment, he needs to be involved in during preparation of during undergoing the risk assessment and determination of control. So he should be aware of what are the control procedures. So he needs to be having a say in during the preparation of HIRA register. He should be a part and parcel of incident investigation, involvement in development, anything, any improvement, any management of change. He should be a part and parcel of it. Review of policies and objectives. Again, during the review of policies and objectives, his view also should be taken. Not necessarily he decides onto the policies, but his opinion, his views has to be taken on the while framing the policies and objectives. So this is mainly focused towards the safety management system. Next. We are talking about clause 8, which is operations. The organization shall plan, implement, and control the process. Now we are talking about operation planning and control. What is this operation planning? Operation planning is nothing but it is purely a standard operating procedure when, as far as quality is concerned, it's pure standard operating procedure. As far as safety is concerned, it's a subset of standard operating procedure which is known as safety operating procedure or safe operating procedure. So let's look at it. Requirement for products and services. The organization shall plan, implement, and control the processes. Yes, they have to control the processes by requirement for products and services. So because processes is one thing, but you have to look at the product and services also as a part, and you have to have a holistic approach to it, wherein it encompasses product and services also. You have to establish the criteria for it. You have to look at the processes, acceptance of product and services, resource conformity, that is product and services, control plant changes, any changes is there, so you need to have the controls in the plant. What do you mean by plant control changes is basically, suppose if you have a operating procedure, standard operating procedure, then you have to make changes in that particular plant. So any change has to be done by the concerned person, and it is let known, and basically views has to be taken by the other stakeholders. Stakeholder is basically, I am talking about the other interested parties, is the internal interested parties, is the other functional. If they are part and parcel of those systems, so their opinion also has to be taken into play. They have to be taken, and then the management it should go for a management of change. Review the consequence of unintended changes. Any unintended changes, basically you have to review the consequence of it. Mitigate any adverse effect. Any adverse effect is there, so you need to have a mitigation procedures to it. Outsource processes, again, basically outsource processes also is a part and parcel under your scope as far as ISO 9000 is concerned. So any outsource processes, what do you mean by outsource processes? Basically, we are talking about the third-party activities. Like in a plant, there are a lot of contracts. Apart from your employees, there are a lot of contract activities going on. We are talking about the housekeeping, we are talking about the facility management. All those things become the outsourced processes. The security part, all those things are the part of outsourced processes. So their activities are also equally important as well as far as the ISO 9000 is concerned. So basically, we are looking at their operation controls also. Next. Customer communication. This is again when this is purely we are talking about the ISO 9000. We will look at informing related to products and services, handle inquiries, contract or orders, include changes, obtain customer feedback, customer complaints, handling or controlling customer property. Again, at times basically customer there are customers property also. Customers give you all the resources and tells you to basically this is talking about the contract manufacturing. So everything is the control, everything is the customer, and then you are just basically contract manufacturing for that. So control, handling or controlling customers' property. So that becomes the customer property. The machinery is also customer. You are working on behalf of the customer. So at that time, that also is very important. Handling or controlling customers' property. So basically, that is the thing. So you need to properly handle the customer property. Specific requirement for contingency action when relevant. You need to have a contingency action plan also in place. So that these are the proactive steps. Basically, what is that? You need to envisage as far as operation planning and control is concerned. Next slide, please. Determining the requirement for product and services. Organization shall ensure requirement for the product and services are defined, including any applicable statutory regulatory requirement. Because there are a lot of statutory requirements as far as your property, as far as your ISO 9000 is concerned. Here we are talking about like FDA approval. This is one of the examples. FDA approval. So statutory regulatory requirement also has to be looked into, considering necessary by the organization, meet the claim for the product and services it offers. So we need to look at the statutory requirement as far as the product and services are concerned. The regulation part of it is concerned. Next, various taxation parts of it is concerned. That also becomes a part of the product and services. Next. Review the requirement for products and services. Organization shall ensure its requirement, ability, and conduct a review before committing to supply products and services. Again, this is between the customer and the management. Basically, you need to do a proper review, a thorough review, and there should not be any ambiguity. So basically, what is that customer's requirement is there. We have to sit across and review the thing. What is that we need to look at? Requirement specific by the customer. What is the specific requirement of the customer? Delivery and the post-delivery activities non-stated by the customer. At times, some thing is there which is not stated by the customer. So we need to be knowing that thing also. That is, we are talking of implied need of the customer, which is not stated by the customer. Specified by the organization. Something which is specified by the organization. So everything should be crystal clear. There should not be any ambiguity, and clarity should be there. Statutory and regulatory things has to be again explicitly dealt with. Contract or order differing from those previously expressed. Anything change in the contract has to be again talked about. Note, customer's requirement shall be confirmed by the organizer before acceptance when the customer does not provide a documented statement of the requirement. So basically, this is prior to that. Next. So this becomes operation and planning control as far as ISO 9000 is concerned. Organization shall retain documented information. Everything should be in a black and white. Again, black and white doesn't mean paper. It can be in the soft media also. So nowadays it's talking about documented information. Okay, result of review. So any reviews has been done with the customer has to be there. Any new requirement for the products and services also should be in the documented form. Next, reviews also should be documented. It's not if it is telephonic also, it should be recorded. It becomes basically a documented information. Documented, as we said, documented doesn't mean that everything should be in writing. It should not necessarily writing. It can be soft media, it can be any media, it can be on telephonic conversation, recorded. All those things becomes a documented information. Next. The organization ensures that relevant documents and information are amended. So basically, any changes to be done, requirement, it can be done. Relevant persons are made aware of changes requirement. So it can't be one way. Any changes to be done, it has to be properly reviewed, and then it has to be done with proper consent. Products and services are changed. So everything, amendment to the changes can be done, but with proper consent. Next. Design and development of products and services. So this becomes purely a part and parcel of ISO 9000. Organization shall consider, implement, maintain a design and development process appropriate to provision of products and services. What do we mean by design? Design is basically the final part of it. If you have a particular product, so what is its design? What do you mean by design? Its dimension is the design, basically. Its content is the design. What are the ingredients is the design. So all those things, R&D, it is mainly the job of the R&D department to have to go for a design. So this is we are talking about our product development. They are into this particular design stage. So design has to be properly documented and agreed upon. That is more important. Next. Control of external provided processes, products and services. Organization shall consider products and services from external providers. Products and services are provided directly to the customer by external provider. Process is provided by. So it can be it can be in any form. Like services can be by the external providers. Basically, something is that customer gives you the facility and then you give them the labor. So it can be in any form. For any reason, basically, that should be a proper documentation, that should be a proper consent, that should be a proper evaluation, and it should be monitored on a regular basis. That is what is put here, and it should be documented information. Nothing should be verbally. Even if it is verbally, it should be recorded. We talked about the documentation. Next. So these are what is the control exercise. That is what is we are talking about. What are the controls? External provider process remains with the control within the control. Define controls. We have to define the controls. Consider potential impact and effectiveness of control, and then we have to verify that those controls exercises, whether the controls are being followed or not. It is being maintained or not, exercised or not. So that is what it is talking about. So these are all the controls. Next. Information for external providers. External provider communication, approval of products and services. So these are all approvals. We are talking about information. What information we need to do? We talk about the competency, the skill level of for external providers. Any external provider is there, so we need to spell out all those things. We have to talk about the competency of a person working. External provider, we need to interact with those persons. Again, we are talking about the monitoring, the performance, verification, and validation. We have to verify and validate whether it is in line with the requirement. Next. So again, basically, this you can just go to it. This is again the extension of this action to prevent human error. For what is the reason? Basically, the controls has to be provided, and when that control can be released. All those things are there, like release, delivery, and post-delivery activities. All those, and then it should be in the documented form. So basically, used for suitable monitoring and measurement. So you can just go through it. So this is the basically we are talking. This is the whole process wherein the control can be exercised from which level to which level, and what are the requirements of the control, by which means, and how it can be controlled. Next. Again, there should be a traceability to everything, right from beginning to the end. So again, when we talk of traceability, nowadays it is the 2015 talks about the cradle to grave as far as the traceability is also concerned. It's not only that the raw material what you have used, those raw material from where you have procured, and that particular procurement, that particular person, what is that he has procured from which place, and then what is the quality of that. So it is basically talking about the generation of the raw material also is a part and parcel of the traceability. So suppose if you produce a product and it is in the market, the traceability should go to the extent of the raw material which you have procured from which sources, and then basically, and what is the quality, whether they have a proper procedure for quality check of that, and whether they have given a right type of product to you. Basically, that means the raw material. That is what they are talking about, the traceability. So again, traceability also they are talking about the cradle to grave. It's not only that once your product leaves your organization, your responsibility goes away. No, absolutely not. Even you have to trace it back to the extent of the raw material procurement. Next. and all these things should be in the documented form. So that means basically you need to be very particular right from the beginning when you procure the raw material. All those documentation should prove that your product is as per, it conforms to the required standard, properly belong to the customer of external provider, organizational assured, identify, protect, and safeguard. Here they are talking about safeguarding the property of the customer who has provided you the property. Okay, reporting system, customer external provider is lost, damage, documented. Everything should be documented in for you. That is for sure. And basically, if he has provided you the you need to
Sorry for the inconvenience. There were some net issues. So we will continue again with this session.
yeah.
Sorry for the inconvenience. You can continue again.
So we are talking about property belong to customers. Next slide, please. Yeah. Here they are talking about the preservation. They are talking about the protection of their properties. Basically, anything, any material and all. Here preservation, output during production and service provision, because it is the responsibility of the person who is doing it on behalf of the customer. Suppose if a customer has given you something and some raw material, so you need to, it's your duty that you have to preserve it. Suppose if you have dumped some raw material with you for conversion, and then something goes wrong with that particular raw material, then it is your responsibility, because you have been given the charge of that particular raw material and you have to preserve it in a proper manner as per the desired requirement of understanding. Next. Post-delivery activities, organization shall consider extent of post-delivery activities. Basically, we are looking at the statutory. That we should be particular about the undesired consequences, nature, use, and intended life. Customer requirement, what is the requirement of the customer, and then we need to give out customer feedback post-delivery. Next. Any change, basically control of change, you have to review it, document it, authorize it. Next. Release of product and services. So again, basically there is a protocol to the release of services also. How is that? You need to release it. Basically, appropriate stages, verify it, plan until the planned arrangement comply, or you have to certify it, basically that it is properly done, and what are the criteria, then traceability to the authorized release. So this is the protocol what you have to follow for release of products and services. Next. What is that he has to do? Look at his correction, segregation, containment, return of or suspension. So if in case of rejection, non-conforming, the output is non-conforming. Suppose if a product is non-conforming, so what is that he needs to do? He has to correct it. Second thing, what he can do is that he can segregate it. He should keep basically containment area, return or suspicion. At times he can return. He has to inform the customer, obtain authorization for acceptance under concession. Sometimes basically if it is goes beyond range, then it is acceptable to the customer. Then he has to obtain his authorization under concession and then forward it to him. Verification when non-conformity output is corrected. You have to verify when the output are corrected. After it gets non-conforming outputs are corrected, because you make some alteration to the non-conforming product and then basically you segregate it and then basically check it properly and then you remove the good ones. So that's the verification what you have changed. You have sorted it out. So after sorting also it is corrected. So you have to verify it and then authorize it. That's how you have to have a control on non-conforming product. Next. Organization shall retain. What all they should retain? Basically control of non-conformity, action taken. What is the action taken? Concession obtained from the customer, that whether it is acceptable to them with some changes. Non-conforming authority deciding the action with respect to non-conforming. So suppose if the customer tells you that you can basically, he gives you some authorities to decide onto the action on the non-conformity. So based on his authority and getting sanctions, you can act upon it. Next. Aim to develop an understanding of the requirement and auditor's issue. 4.4.6, basically we are talking about the old standard. This is the old standard. Okay, next, operation control. Performance evaluation. That has been removed. Performance evaluation we are talking about is now that like we are talking about P. P is basically we have planned and we have done it. Basically we have checked it. Okay, and now we are talking about where are we? Monitoring and measurement, analysis and evaluation. So we now evaluate again the requirement. So what is that method of monitoring? I need to know the method of monitoring, measuring, analysis, evaluation, ensure valid results, and effectiveness QMS documented information. So basically, when we talk of evaluation, we need to look at what is that is expected and where are we with the requirement. That is what we are talking about, is monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. Next. There is again a perception survey. So we are talking about on a larger scale. Basically, we need to monitor customer perception. What is the perception? The perception is not only on the product. It is talking about the delivery, timely delivery, the quality, the various factors. Basically, we are talking about the consistency. All those things are part and parcel of the customer's requirement. So on his perception, what is his perception? We need to ask the customer his perception, and based on the perception, we need to carry out customer survey on a regular basis to judge his satisfaction level on a particular scale. Method of obtaining, monitoring, and reviewing. So what are the methods basically we should adopt to monitor and review the customer satisfaction? That we need to decide, and then we need to follow that method. Next. Next. So analysis and evaluation. What is that basically we will analyze, and what is that we will retain? Conformity. We will analyze whether it is conforming to the requirement. Anything what we do, we'll check it. Why we'll check it? Basically, we will analyze or check or measure. Why? Basically, whether it is in line or whether it is conforming to the requirement of the standard or requirement of the customer. The requirement of the standard is as far as safety is concerned, environment is concerned, requirement of the customer as far as 9th of the is concerned. So we'll look at the conformity part of it. when we talk of customer, we have given some specification. That is the conformity as far as the quality is concerned. When we talk of environment, whatever is the pollution control board norms, whether we are in line with those norms, the emission norm, that is what. When we talk of safety, we are talking about compliance as far as the Factories Act are concerned. Compliance about regarding other various acts on safety are concerned. So those are basically we are talking about the conformity part of it. Customer satisfaction, we are talking about it purely. It is focusing more on to ISO 9000, because we don't go for any surveys on environment with the directly with the regulatory bodies to certain extent. That is not the practice which is prevailing in India at least. So customer satisfaction, at least we can talk about the neighbors and all those things on some aspect of pollution. But here, not directly with the regulatory bodies. Performance and effectiveness of QMS, basically we are talking about planning, risk and opportunities, performance. All those things basically we can evaluate on a regular basis. Whether whatever we have planned, we have completed it or not as per the plan. Risk and opportunities, whatever we have lined up, whether we have taken it as a part of the improvement activity, that can be one of the activities as the risk and opportunity is concerned. Performance of external providers, whatever external providers basically has given us. So whether it is in line with their requirement, and overall improvement related to the QMS can be measured and evaluated. Next, why monitor? Why do we monitor anything? Checking effectiveness. Otherwise, we won't come to know whether basically we are meeting the requirement. Effectiveness is effectiveness of the requirement. What is required? If it is basically meeting the requirement, means it is effective. Demonstrate compliance, because that is the bare minimum. Like we are exceeding the compliance as far as this thing is concerned. So that means basically we are talking about exceeding the requirement. That's more effective. But the basic thing is demonstrate the compliance and assist implement improvement. Because if we are on the borderline, we still want to improve. So basically that particular monitoring will help us to further improve. Or we are on the borderline of the standards, the range. So we can improve our range. We can narrow down our range. So that is what we are talking about, assist improvement. So that's the reason we need to do a monitoring. Next, requirement of monitoring is appropriate sampling method. So that's again a skill, and that is again a methodology. So you need to follow a proper methodology. So what is that? We are talking about sampling method. Reliable monitoring. Monitoring should be reliable, and measurement equipment, because the measurement equipment should be properly calibrated. Reliable monitoring is basically the process itself should be a proper process, what we need to follow. Something with basically national or international standards that has to be adopted. Appropriate sampling schedule. Again, the schedule part also should be proper, appropriate. Test result analysis. Analysis part also should be done in a standard manner. Adequate review leading to action. We need to review it. Otherwise, we do some monitoring activity, we keep the record, that's all. It's not meant for just keeping the record, but you need to review that so that we can narrow down on the range and improve upon it. Appropriate record keeping. Again, record keeping also should be appropriate. At times, basically, we don't keep record. We do that some monitoring has been done. Yeah, it's okay. So we don't keep record. But when we keep a record, it gives you a trend. It shows you that basically how are you performing. So record keeping also is more important, and it should be proper and appropriate. And all these things should be done by a trained person, because unless and until a person is trained and skilled, he won't develop that particular skills in performing his activity, because monitoring becomes more of a skill activity and more of having an analytical aptitude and analytical skill. That is what is required by that particular person. Next, we'll look at the internal audit, which is common to all the management systems. Conduct internal audit and planning. So, first and foremost thing, you need to prepare a plan, internal audit plan. When we talk about plan, it should be over a period of 1 year and at proper interval. Audit criteria. What are the criteria of the audit? Basically, what are criteria is basically which all the areas you will be covering as far as the audit is concerned. Audit selection, auditor selection. So you need to select the auditors. Who are the auditors for which particular standard, which particular system? Corrective and correction and corrective action basically becomes a part and parcel of the internal audit now, as preventive action has already been removed. Effective implementation and maintain. Basically, we need to maintain, implement and maintain that particular audit, internal audit system and the record. Documented information, everything should be properly documented. Next, organization shall ensure first is plan, establish, implement, maintain an audit program. What is the frequency of the audit? What is the methodology of audit? Who is responsible? Planning requirement. Who is reporting of those things? Reporting is basically we are talking about reporting to who is the immediately the departmental head. We are talking about reporting is mainly this activity is by way of submitting the report, the internal auditor report, and then obtaining the auditee's signature and the corrective action plan, basically. Change affecting the organization. This is reviewed in the management review meeting, and the changes, what is affecting the organization is again is the part and parcel of those management reviews. Result of previous audit. That is also a part of the internal audit. Where are we basically vis-a-vis the last year, last audit? Management reviews, we are talking of planned interval. It has to be done in planned interval. Periodically, it has to be done. Continuing suitability, adequacy. It's adequacy audit. It's adequacy review. Adequacy is basically we are talking about what is the requirement of the standard and what is that we are doing. So basically, bridging the gap. What is that our objective and target? What is that our policy state, and where are we against our policy? So that is what is called as adequacy. Effectiveness. Effectiveness is basically gauged by the outputs. Output. Basically, these are the inputs to the audit, and what is the output is the effectiveness. Effectiveness is basically we are talking about this many planned training. We are talking about this many reduction of complaints. We are talking about this many hazard HIRA improvement, meeting the objectives. These are the skill set, basically competencies, development of all those things basically result into effectiveness. The customer feedback, the customer surveys, all those things become the part and parcel of the effectiveness of the management review, because that is what is going to the management as the inputs to the management review. Alignment with organization strategic direction, because as we are talking about risk and opportunities which are part and parcel of the strategic direction, strategic management, because this is in line with the top management. So it should be aligned, the whole thing, your meeting should be aligned. So all those things should be discussed, and then it has to be taken up by the top management of that particular unit to the higher up, that is the managing director. So that's why we are talking about it. It should be that management review output should be aligned with the top management, which will give you a proper strategic direction for further improvement in the system. Next, management input. When we talk about meeting, basically management review, something should go as the input and then should come out of the meeting. That is the output. So let's look at basically what is the management review input. Management review input is the action status, various activities of various functions as far as that particular system is concerned is the inputs too. Like maybe we are talking about customer complaint is one of the input, accidents as one of the input. Some in environment management system, various reports, various pollution parameters are the review, are the action status. All those things, the training number of mandates will be the action status. All those things will go to the management as an input during the management review. Change in external and internal issues. Again, basically we are looking at, here we are talking about the external and internal issues, which is 4.1. So all will be the external, those will be the inputs to the management review. QMS performance and effectiveness. So what is that vis-a-vis the expectation of the customer will be the performance and effectiveness. The customer feedback also will be the performance and effectiveness. Customer satisfaction, again the index, the review of the customer resulting into the satisfaction index will be the inputs to the management review. Feedback of the interested parties, various complaints regarding environment, complaints regarding safety by the employees per se, some government notices, all those things will be the feedback from the interested parties. Quality objectives will be reviewed over there with vis-a-vis the status of it. Conformity of product and services can be the review. Even it can be the internal audit report can be the inputs to the management review. Next. Yeah, it's there. Sorry. Non-conformities and corrective actions is there. Result of monitoring and measurement is a part of the review. Audit results are reviews. Performance of external providers is review are the inputs. Adequacy of resources. So you need to each function. The HR function has to tell the management that basically how adequacy of the resources, whether we have got ample resources as far as the system is concerned. So those things are a part of the inputs to the management review. Effectiveness of risk and opportunities. What is the effectiveness of risk and opportunity? Whether the risk has been taken for improvement, whether the opportunities has been considered for further improvement. So all those things basically becomes a part of internal inputs to the management review. Opportunities for improvement. Any opportunities for improvement becomes a part of the management review. Next. What will be the output? So all those things will be churned and discussed in the management review. And their inputs of the management will be opportunities for improvement. From those things, from those basically laundry list or from those discussion points, something will emerge out. Like we have to work on these areas. These are the opportunities for, when we talk about opportunities from improvement, what is that input which management use? Management will look from the perspective of whether it is implementable. So what is that? Basically, we are talking whether we have ample resource, whether we have a technical constraint or not. No, we are very through with the technical thing. We have financially sound. So all those things, based on those things, then management will come out with opportunity for improvement. So that is what is the output of management review. Need for changes to QMS. So further, if the management thinks that there is some need for changes to the quality management system, so those things they will give the feedback, and that will be the output from the management review. Resource needed. At times there are resource constraints. At times there are resource constraints. So what are the resources needed will be the output of the management review. And everything will be in a documented form. So that will be output. That means we are talking about the minutes of the meeting of the management review will be the documented information, the output of it. The actionable point. Next. Next. Organization determine improvement protocols. What is the improvement? This is the last clause, improvement. Now we are talking about, we have reviewed it. Now we are talking about we need to improve. So improve is that which areas basically product and services address for future needs and expectations. What is the future needs and expectations from our interested parties, our customers, correcting, preventing or reducing undesirable effects. Some undesirable effects are we need to reduce it. So that will be the improvement area. Performance and effectiveness of UMS. Performance is basically we are not performing as per the desired requirement. We are not giving proper results, so we need to further improve upon it. So that's the performance and effectiveness of QMS. What we are talking about, we are minimizing the ranges of expectation of the customer. That's what is we are talking about the improvement. Yeah, next. Non-conformity and corrective actions. When a non-conformity organization includes complaint, the organization what has to be done. That's again an improvement, because where do you get that areas of improvement? It's through non-conformities also. So non-conformities is the gray area where you are not performed as per the expectation. So what is that? React to the non-conformities means we have to react it. We have to have an action plan for the non-conformity and see that it is basically implemented. That is what is reacted. Action to control and correct. So basically, we need to look at the non-conformity. Not necessarily always that it will be 100% okay, but we have to see that how we can control and correct it. There are some control measures to be exercised, and then we need to see that how it is corrected. Deal with the consequences. Any consequences we need to look at. Suppose if it is not implementable at this stage, so we have to deal with the consequences. Means basically we have to see that how it doesn't go beyond that particular level. That is what is deal with the consequences. So we need to ensure that now it is non-conformity, but it can be a major emergency situation in near future. So we need to see that it should not go to that extent of emergency situation. That's what we are talking about. Deal with the consequences. Action to eliminate the cause of non-conformity. We need to look at the root cause. When we talk of non-conformity, we can't have a superficial action. That is the correction part of it. We need to go for a root cause analysis and see that how the corrective action is taken. Reviewing the non-conformity. Immediately it has to be reviewed. That is the main thing what we are talking about. It has to be reviewed. It's not that we are just giving the non-conformity and then in next meeting or next audit, we look at the non-conformity and then we try to close that by any means. No, we have to review it immediately and then we have to analyze the non-conformity and look at the root cause of it. Next. When non-conformity occurs, including complaints, the organized cell where similar non-conformity exists. So here we are talking about is basically horizontal deployment. Anything is happening somewhere else, so we need to see that the whole thing is corrected at one go. So we need not wait for the non-conformity to be raised at the other end. So we should be basically closed horizontally. Implement any action needed. We are talking about action. We have to immediately act upon it. Review the effectiveness of any correction action taken. Update risk and opportunity. So this is we have to align. Whatever non-conforming, we can't basically have it in silos. Silos is basically like it should be aligned with the system. Any non-conformity which is raised, it's not a standalone thing. It has got a repercussion. So it has got some bearing on the system. So you need to trace back and look at your other clauses and then correct in those particular clauses and take action so that everywhere that particular activities is looked at and then it is corrected. So the system is strengthened and made more robust. Next. Continual improvement. Continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of QMS to enhance quality performance. So basically, this is the ongoing thing. Because we are talking about a continual improvement. All the standards talk about the continual improvement. So there should be a continual improvement going on of the system for better effectiveness. Focus should be relevant to risk and benefit. That is what the new standard talks about. The whole focus should start from risk and opportunities. So that is where we need to look at. Improvement can be incremental, small changes on breakthrough, new technology. So either it can be incremental by way of some input from your down the line stuff, or breakthrough is basically innovation or a new technology. So it can be either. If it's a serious thing and then it requires really improvement in the technology. So it's a breakthrough and it requires basically innovation sort of and new machineries and all those things to get better output and better productivity. And incremental things also can be looked at by way of involvement of your employees. Next.